Welcome back to Mark's Headroom. I believe this is episode or week 16. I'm breaking a 5-day fast in about an hour. And people started calling me Mark's Headroom or Max Headroom from some of the other work that I put out on YouTube and TikTok and elsewhere. So that's what this channel is really all about. Spilling the beans, so to speak. Sharing whatever is coming up at the end of a 5-day fast in Austin, Texas. As I've mentioned before, I've been doing this for around 5 years, and it's pretty insightful. But anyway, had an interesting day. I started off the day, I did a heavy workout, and then I got cleaned up, and I had an audition for a film, and it was for a role. I think if you're not involved in film or theater, you would probably call this a very menacing character who was confronting and taking advantage of his son's girlfriend. And it was a pretty interesting role and script. I think at least the early name of the film is called Vicious. And I believe that it's about the character I was doing's son, who is named Vicious in the film. So anyway, if that gives you an idea of what's going on, I'm told it was that the whole screenplay is modeled off of a novel or a book that's been written. And since I'm something of a Rumpelstiltskin, so to speak, I haven't read the book, and I didn't even go out and seek it out. I read the short excerpt from the probably 5 pages from the screenplay to prepare for the role and tape my audition. And so if you haven't known an actor or been involved with that process, it's pretty fascinating. I have an agent, a SAG agent, Screen Actors Guild franchised agent in Houston named Pastorini Bosby, and they're very professional. They take care of the contractual and do some marketing. In Texas, the marketing is a lot different than it is, I think, in LA. But and as well as all the casting in Texas is a lot different than it is in LA. And this looked like a small independent film, probably a fairly low budget, that was going to involve this character that I was auditioning for about 10 days here. And it's going to shoot here in Austin in January, supposedly. So you do 100 auditions and get one role, kind of like in sales. But anyway, it's an interesting process, and I feel kind of good about the audition that I sent off. Who knows? You just don't know exactly what kind of what the director and the producers are looking for. A lot of the casting that takes place for film work that you might see on Netflix or Amazon or HBO is either cast toward celebrity model types that are that's a I don't think I could ever join that group. I you know no I can't say never, but it as I've gotten to understand the business, and as well as gotten really comfortable with being an artist myself, it almost seems like success in some of these, at least success by the world standard, um, early on. might be very confining for how you've, like if you really need that expression and the freedom and the liberty that you find as you evolve as an artist, it might be very difficult to keep working, um, year after year or month after month as an actor, because I think a lot of times people get typecast and are sought after, or may just be part of the um, relationship with the audience is kind of fixated on a role that they really see you in, and a lot of times it's difficult to escape that. That's not a problem for me because very few people have seen my work. The Texas independent films that I've been in are mostly on YouTube or on some freeway, um, kind of obscure channel. Maybe some of them have been sent overseas. I don't know, but never was really doing it for the recognition. Acting for me was a great way to explore scenes that I'd had in my own life and experiment with characters in a place where the circumstances um, didn't have the same level of well, what's the word I'm looking for here? You didn't have to feel the consequences of what the character was acting out in the scene, at least consequences in terms of real life consequences, I think internally and emotionally, and also from a self-awareness and courage standpoint, to say some of the things that I've had a chance to say in scene work to other actors and actresses, and to go through those scenes is very enlightening. And if you really commit to it, it can really open your whole body and system and the wholeness that you have as a human being, and help you consider things from a perspective that is rather unusual. So I found, it's kind of like when you run into trouble in your life and you go see a therapist and you talk about things that most people don't talk to their um, wife or husband or mother or father about, or even maybe someone at work or a school counselor. Um, there's some things that people just are raised to have shame and guilt around, that, they don't even want to talk to a priest about it. And that's probably a whole nother can of worms there. But anyway, the acting for me was a great way to explore myself, and how things work in some of the scripts and screenplays. I had a great acting coach here in Austin who I worked with from probably around 2018, 17, 18 into about the beginning of COVID. Her name is Laurel Vouvre. She studied with Sanford Meisner in New York. Her mother was a theater actress in New York, and she was in casting in California for a while and cast some stars that I know that you've seen. Actually, discovered some of the stars that you've seen in movies and on TV. And I was very fortunate to come here to Austin back in 2014, 15. Of course, I've been in and out of Austin for years and had places here while I was running companies out of Houston. But I really kind of stumbled into Laurel's craft, and bringing the Meisner technique that she uses was a lifesaver for me. I didn't really expect to be talking about this today, but I found film acting was very insightful in the 1990s when I started struggling with my own trauma from childhood and the emotions that no counselor or therapist or psychologist or coach, mentor in business had helped me be able to accept and understand in myself. And so Cliff Osman was a fellow that I ran into, and he was doing workshops in Dallas, Texas. And I started doing those in the early 90s, and I was kind of falling apart. And that relationship that I developed with Cliff, as well as the acting, watching myself on film, helped me gain some composure and insight as to what was happening inside of me that I think otherwise would have turned into, well, who's to say how things might have worked out otherwise? But I found it to be very therapeutic and helpful, and I had a chance to, really pursue acting as a serious, dedicated full-time profession through Cliff. His wife was in LA, and I think she may still be, and was working as an agent. And he invited me to come out there and kind of sleep on his couch while, I tried to make it, so to speak. And I had some commitments in Texas to my family and kids that I just couldn't do that. So I stayed in Texas and got some good training from him, and I went out to California several times and kind of kicked the can around, so to speak. And you know, I don't regret it now, not going to LA and pursuing acting in full time, just for the main reason that I just stated earlier, was that I think I've enjoyed the freedom that not every artist has a chance to enjoy. Um, because if you are successful, maybe everyone wants you to do something that is not flowing from your internal um, essence that I would have had the chance. I mean, I think what I've been through over the past 30 years since I started kind of looking into acting and exploring it for the first real time in my life, 30, 35 years ago. And so it's been of great service to me. Just like photos and videos are super insightful if you learn to work and be, well, kind of forgiving and accepting of what you see and hear in the videos that your playbacks. Um, it can be brutal. I know people that they can't stand to even see their own photos. They start to look at their face and the just very critical of themselves. And people are the same way with their voice. They can't believe that they sound that way. And for me, film work was very um, insightful, not only in self acceptance, but also of my appearance and of mannerisms and states that I saw myself shifting from one moment to the next, and from one scene or circumstance to the next. Oh, so powerful, to have a chance to explore that if you're able to. Now, I caution you, it's not for everyone, and sometimes you need a good coach like I had with Cliff and some trusted people around me to to help me with self-acceptance and to feel okay about all the discomfort that you go through, or most of us go through, whenever you're exploring yourself. And so, anyway, acting and the camera, the technology that we have today is really incredible in helping us understand ourselves better if you use it right. And so, anyway, we'll see what happens with that. I do audition for a number of commercials every month. It seems like my agent sends me several commercials, and occasionally for a TV series that's shooting in the area, or a film like this. Um, I, I'll be honest. Not that I'm not I intend to be honest all the time, but I think one of the deeper things that I've learned about how I come off on film is often that there's a powerful and kind of an intimidating and well, it's an authoritative side that works real well when you're doing oil and gas or you're in management and leading others. Um, at least in this day and age, that is an advantage. And maybe the white hair and some of the experience that I have in business and around the world, um, and in engineering, makes it a difference. But from a real human side, one of the things that was challenging to me that I picked up on from feedback from not directly from an acting teacher or coach, um, my two primary coaches being Cliff Osman for 5 to 7 years in the 90s, and then Laurel Vouvre for about 5 years, most recently. But another student, or actually it was an experienced actor or actress that was filling in for an acting coach who I was just doing a kind of a trial to see if this coach would be right for me. And she told me that I had this menacing side beneath everything else. And what she saw, and this was back in 2014 or 15, a little over 10 years ago, was my trauma, was my anger and rage leaking out. And but she really did help me understand myself a whole lot better by giving me a little bit of feedback like that. And I watched a number of my tapes, my self films, and some of the film work that I'd done, and I could see the I could see there was times that I was putting on a false front. I wasn't really in the scene, and there was something that was kind of keeping me away from being really connected to the other person and to the role that I was playing. And I was also fortunate to have a great group around me when I was studying here in Austin most recently, and back in the 90s in Dallas, where I was studying with Cliff for the most part. Um, had some really, really good actors and actresses around me that were well trained, also, very um, had lived lives that had uh, had been examined, and they were able to give me some feedback that was very helpful along the way. So, I'd like to find a way to thank some of those people along the way and go back. I went back recently and visited with one of those ladies in Dallas from that old group back in the 90s, and that was very, very satisfying and very rewarding, for me to reconnect with that. Some circumstances that I went through kind of just ripped me away from that setting back in the late 90s, and I had to start over in Houston. So that's acting. The other thing was I had a great conversation with a very close person in my life, and he said something that I think I need to share here because I've had a similar thought, but I never considered it from the perspective that he introduced. And he said, Mark, we live in a low trust society. In our whole society, our whole capitalism is built on low trust. And I thought that's interesting because most people, whenever you say, hey, you don't trust me, that sounds like a put down. But the truth of the matter is, we do not trust each other. We don't even trust ourselves in most cases. Do we trust our institutions? Do we trust our the Constitution or these ideas that we have out there? Well, we like to believe that we do, and we like to believe that we do trust each other to an extent. And that's part of what makes this community maybe possible is a certain degree of trust. But the cornerstone is that there isn't enough, and we have this distrust of each other. And it just starts, I mean, even in a neighborhood. Yeah, we may trust our neighbors, but we still lock our doors, even if we're in a gated community. So why is that? What's that about? Well, well, that's one of the reasons I wrote 25 books in this series called The Awakening Chronicles, was to examine a solution to that, which is to do the work on yourself, because you can't necessarily force others to trust, but you can challenge yourself to have enough self-knowledge. And I guess that's kind of why I cracked the this episode open with film acting, and the self-knowledge that I've gained from that is that I think one of the core pieces of the answer whenever someone says, well, what can you do? Well, you have to realize that you can't change anyone else. You can't change institutions. You can throw money at problems. You can throw words and videos at problems, but and try to be an influence on others. But the bottom line is the only thing you really have much control over is yourself. And if you can't trust yourself, if you don't have self-awareness so that you have an understanding of yourself, and you know that, well, in this circumstance, I'm probably going to do this. And then you say, well, my values are such that I don't want to do that. Well, then that means, we don't, we create a routine, and we kind of put some restrictions around ourselves to make sure that we don't put ourselves in that situation. Or maybe it's from another angle. It's hey, I don't feel very good doing that. I really don't. I didn't realize that, but now I do. So now I have some new awareness of a certain circumstance that I need to pursue more of. So I'll continue to feel more authentic or true or happy or whatever that is that's bringing me satisfaction or success, or um, helping me feel connected to the people or to others that really, where I do find it rewarding. And so that's a very interesting segue into a discussion with people about their rules and their standards. Is how much do you trust yourself? And I find that phrasing that, at least the way that he presented it to me, opened up a totally different pathway into my thought process than maybe the other way around. I mean, sometimes you're talking to people and you say, we need to trust each other more. And then the conversation is kind of a different tone. The reaction may be, hey, we have a lot of trust here. And you get kind of defensive about the way that you're operating. But if you begin the conversation with a remark like, we really don't trust each other. We lock our doors. We put on, certain clothes to portray a certain image or character, or protect ourselves, hide our body fat. We clean up and comb our hair and we shave. And, are we ashamed of our primal um, organic state that our bioform, our organism is working from, the housing of our incarnation and our soul and essence? Are we ashamed? Are we feeling guilty about that? Do we have secrets? So, another thing that I did recently was I made one of my videos on future wise energy was about the Venezuelan tanker that was, I think it was called the Skipper, that the United States or the administration um, took. And I'll just say this here without, I'm kind of apolitical, but um, the fact that there's been all these sanctions that have been made on Russian oil and, even Venezuelan oil to, penalize certain countries from, or because they're violating the rules of the game that most of us are playing, or most countries are say that they're playing in. But the fact that that we haven't done this earlier, for years we've been sanctioning, oil around the world. There's a whole underground that's running these huge ships with, millions of barrels of oil floating around in the sea that are being taken to refineries and bypassing the mainstream or the known avenues of trade. And so anyway, when I heard this, that we took over a uh, a, uh, a vessel that was carrying almost 1.8 million barrels of oil. The reporters were, you know, um, really making a huge deal about it. And as I did the research, there's like 30 other tankers floating around Venezuela, that size or probably larger. And and who knows how many are up there, around Russia, taking oil through this shadow market into China and elsewhere. So I wasn't all that excited. It's the reporters are being good reporters, I'm sure, but sometimes their level of I guess you got to grab headlines to get people's attention, and that's what a lot of it is about. But anyway, it drew my attention, and I made this video, and as I did the research, I found out how much oil had been, run through this shadow market. Even I think Biden had given a free pass to Chevron to take oil and actually operate some of those heavy oil fields in Venezuela. I spent several years in Venezuela off and on in the 90s before Chavez was let out of jail and came into office. So I'm very familiar with that. It's a huge oil reserve there, 300 billion barrels of heavy oil are thought to be um, known in Venezuela. So I think it is a lot different place than it's being compared to some places in the Middle East where we've pursued regime change, and I think I've had a number of Venezuelans work for me, and of course, being in country, I helped train a lot of and work with management in workshops to help them think like Western oil men might, from a technical standpoint and from a management and intelligence standpoint, to make the most of the resource that they have at their disposal. And unfortunately, most of the revenue that's come off that has just gone to the elite in that country. But I've had a number of Venezuelans work for me over the years or with me, and have a lot of hope that that country could benefit from the resources that they have there. And I really have no idea what the ultimate end game here is for the country and what our administration may be planning to do there. But I do know that they do have some resources that could be very beneficial and um, would give us an edge in a lot of geopolitics. Whether the resource is actually used or not is another matter, but just to have that in your that it's accessible gives you an advantage when you're bargaining with other world powers that are operating at a very primitive level that are going to exploit resources um, like oil and fossil fuels, whether you like it or not. And that's, you know, I do find that the lowest common denominator around the world is usually who sets the stage for a lot of the rules that are being obeyed, and they kind of raise or lower the state that we're operating in the world. Good case in point is Russia and Ukraine, or Hamas and Israel. So, not trying to be political here, but I'm just talking about the human aspects of these things, and the earth and our relationship to the earth is ultimately um, something that we do need to be considerate of. And um, so this week I also entertained a number of parties that were interested in some advisory work for their diverse energy startups. Right now, data centers that are fueled by mostly natural gas here in Texas are really popular. And I know a lot about natural gas and have had some exposure to other renewables, they call them, like solar and wind and hydro. So, um, I think there's a really smart way to implement uh, the energy from the infrastructure that ultimately generates electricity and makes that um, and distributes it through the grid to all these data centers and to residences as well, and industry. But the data centers are really drawing it right now. And so anyway, I had a number of parties kind of tapping me on the shoulder to consider advising them, or some of them, think I might actually want to work for somebody else, but I don't see that as very likely. But anyway, that was pretty interesting to explore some of those opportunities. Some very well written plans, but there's a lot of money out there, especially outside the U.S., that's trying to find a way into um, Texas energy and the data center game that's going on in the world to fuel all the AI boom that we're talking about, and some of us are actually enjoying. So, what else? I haven't had as many comments recently from people on Mark's Headroom as I have on FutureWise Energy. Had a few comments on Transcendent, and I do find that although I just got on TikTok recently, I get a lot more comments on TikToks. So I don't know if the algorithm on TikTok is that much different. I'm learning and really developing a great appreciation for that platform, because it seems like I run into some barriers in on the Google side, and even had some. I've got a bunch of subscribers on the Transcendent YouTube channel, and I've got a lot of watch hours that are well over the limit, and they seem to be giving me a little bit of a hard time in putting that channel into the monetization category, not like the ads there that would really return that much revenue to me, but nonetheless, it's kind of interesting running into some of the differences between platforms, X, Substack, LinkedIn, YouTube, um, or like um, drawing a blank on some of them right now, but TikTok seems to be one of the most favorable and one of the most organic and natural and open places where people, I think, feel a lot more free to comment. Um, whether you like it or not. I feel like the feeling of freedom on TikTok is higher than on some of these other platforms. I think on LinkedIn, everyone feels like their coworkers are going to know what they said, and they're kind of presenting a certain presenting a persona or a kind of a guarded character with the character that they, it's just a level of fear and judgment, I think, on that I sense on LinkedIn. And then I sense a little bit of that on YouTube, but a whole lot less on TikTok. So anyway, I've had a lot more exposure in all three um, channels that I work from. That those three would be Transcendent, Future Wise Energy, and then this Mark's Headroom. And interestingly, um, the books are I'm starting to get some feedback on this set of books, and it's becoming a little bit more clear to me as to why that. I just my gut told me this was time to roll out these books. I've got more, but I put 20, I think 23 have actually been published right now on Amazon on KDP. You can go to roach.com and find a link there to all the work that I've done in the last probably 5 to 10 years in film, most of the writing that I've done, and then this new book series that I've put out there. And it's a real exploration in consciousness. And I believe that evolution of the individual in developing and honing their own self-awareness and understanding themselves, trusting themselves, uncovering what's unique about them, and really knowing where authentically you fit into some roles in society and in your community and in your family and in your relationship with maybe your most intimate relationship with others is so powerful. And that's what's been um, well, it just hasn't been handed down from one generation to the next, and that's one of those things I'd love to be a provocative voice or vibe or whatever it is to create uh, that movement across mankind. We'll leave it there. Thanks for tuning in, and I appreciate all of your comments and the view time. Catch up with you next week.